basically everything is a lie or some form of deception on some level. And the way I like to think about it is that truth exists on a spectrum between sort of like absolute truth and absolute falsehood, right? But the thing is that everything in real life can never be exactly completely true or exactly false, because the vast majority of things have some elements of truth and some elements of deception sort of tied into them, right? So I think the modern world, especially, we're bombarded with so much information, and the vast majority of that information is deceptive, at least on some level, right? Like, for example, pretty much all marketing material is a deception, in my opinion, right? Like, you see these very polished versions of products, from food to fashion, to pharmaceuticals. Like, almost the entire marketing industry is just built on creating a false perception of a product so that you will buy it and pay more money for it than it's truly worth. And that's part of the reason why I've always been kind of like, I don't know, repulsed by like the idea of working in sales or marketing or anything similar to that, is that basically your entire job is to deceive people's reptilian ancient circuitry of being easily stimulated by flashy marketing, right? Like, our biology is lagging technology by like hundreds to thousands of years. And this is a serious problem, right? Because technology has advanced so rapidly in the last few hundred years that there's just no possible way that evolution could keep up with it. And there's a pretty wide spectrum of lies and deception in general, right? Because technically, a lie implies the intent to deceive the party that you are lying to. But what I find in real life is that a lot of times people have actually lied to themselves, or they have been lied to, and therefore are spreading misinformation or being deceptive, but they truly believe that what they're saying is truthful. So it gets really complicated really fast, because you can't necessarily fully blame them for being a, evil person, because they're not truly evil. They were tricked just like you might be tricked by the lie that they told you. So I think a more accurate term for that type of lying would be deception, because it is sort of this I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's a transmission of a lie. Like, at some level there was an alteration of the truth. And I think an important point too is that oftentimes there isn't an intent. It is simply, the farther along you get in the communication chain, right, the more that the information signal changes. So if you ever played the game of telephone when you were younger, I feel like a lot of us played that when we were in like middle school, grade school, basically one person starts out saying a phrase or a sentence, and then you whisper it in the ear of each person down a line. Maybe it's a line of like, 15, 20, 30 people. And by the time it gets to the end of the line, the message is almost always completely different, or like, way different than the original sentence that was said. And I think this is applicable in so many things in reality, right? Because, a lot of times you'll hear a story from someone that they heard from someone else, that they heard from someone else. And what I've realized is that I notice that I will often change stories at least a little bit, right? Because I want the person that I'm talking to be interested in what I'm saying. And on some level, that behavior is deceptive. And I think that it would be really useful if more people acknowledged that they're being at least somewhat deceptive on some level a lot of the time. Like, think about it. When you are telling someone a story that you heard from a friend or even something that happened to you, you're going to make it sound a bit more interesting or exaggerate some of the details in order to make them, more interested or more fascinated by what you said. And then the problem is that they get this exaggerated perception into their head, right? And then when they tell it to another friend, they're going to say it in an even more exaggerated way. So it's this sort of this amplification chain where the details kind of disappear eventually, and it's more important what the like dramatic emotional narratives and the exaggerated kind of truth bombs or whatever. Really, it's like false bombs, but it's very easy to be tricked by just simple human communication. And there's just so many forms of deception. Like, I think I need to do more videos on it because like there's so many different types of deception to cover. But I mean, just to name a few, like white lies, for example. A lot of times people lie, and it isn't necessarily for a nefarious purpose. It's more so to soften the blow or to make people feel better about themselves, because we live in a society where there's an extremely high cost and risk to saying anything, even if it is like the truth, right? There's an extreme cost to being honest about things that hurt people's feelings. And if you've ever accidentally said something that was too honest to someone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oftentimes people become extremely offended, and you can jeopardize entire relationships over just saying the wrong thing. And it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily, intentionally malevolent in any way. It could literally just be a truth about a person, but if you say it in the wrong way or in the wrong tone, I mean, it could literally be the difference between the person liking you and the person hating you. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of times there is a certain degree of lying that is actually necessary, because if we didn't say these white lies like, oh my God, you look great, or oh my God, like you're so smart, like, I notice it every day, and I don't think necessarily these lies have bad intention behind them, because a lot of times the people saying these lies actually believe the lies. Like, they actually believe that their friend is perfect in this way or the other way. But the problem is that it creates like an inflated sense of ego. And once you have an inflated sense of ego, you're not necessarily going to interact in the world in a way that is most aligned with reality. But here's one thing I've realized that's really getting to the root of like problems in modern society that I've kind of realized recently, is that basically our entire society is fabricated upon this pyramid of lies, right? Like, the lies exist on every level of society. And the problem is that once everyone is collectively buying into the lie, it actually becomes a form of truth. And here's an example of something that no one would think of as being a lie or as being deceptive, but that I think is kind of a prime example of this exact thing that I'm talking about, which is the existence of language. And if you've ever tried to understand a foreign language, you'll realize that you basically have no idea what the person is saying, except for the occasional word that is similar to the languages you do know, or maybe there's like, some type of body language or hand signaling to indicate what the word means. You're going to be completely confused by it. And it's not like they're intentionally lying to you, because maybe that's the only language they know and you don't have a language in common, right? But it is a form of encoded information where the intent behind the person who is communicating said language does not translate into you as the same or similar intent that they meant it to mean. So in a sense, you could encode sort of secret information just by using a language that the non-speaker doesn't know. And what I'm proposing is that deception and lies go way beyond just what we think of as a stereotypical lie, right? Like if I say my hair is blue, you're probably not going to believe me, right? But if I said that I have a yacht in Miami, I mean, do you have any way of knowing for sure that I'm telling the truth or not if I say it in a convincing tone? Because unless you sort of probed that assertion and figured out if I was telling the truth or not, then you don't really have any way of knowing. So a lot of people, for example, might just believe what you say if you say it in a convincing tone, and that's what I call like an outright lie. And yeah, I think the types of lies expand way beyond flat out lies, right? Like you have omission of the truth, right? Like sometimes people will tell you things that are technically true statements, right? But based on the question that you asked, it is very obvious that you were looking for a certain piece of information that they are omitting. And this is deception by omission, right? Like it's the lie of omission. If you don't say something that is obviously an important piece of information, then on some level you are being deceptive. And some responsibility lies in the party that is trying to inquire about the information. So for example, in marketing, if a marketer or salesman doesn't tell you the price of a product until you're at the checkout counter, in my opinion, that is a bit of a lie of omission. Like that, because by the time you're at the counter, you feel pressured to buy it because it would be kind of embarrassing to put the item back because it's like, oh, are people think I can't afford it? Or are people gonna think that I'm broke? Like there's so many social constructs that tie into this fabric of deception. And once you realize that basically almost everything in the human realm of operation is on some level an abstraction of the truth, on some level, yes, it is a lie. Maybe it's only 1% lie and 99% truth. Like, for example, I think that about as close as you can get to the truth is mathematics and science, because science is obsessed with measuring things with extreme precision and essentially pointing you to as close of an approximation to the truth as you can get with current technology. But one thing that people might forget is that there's always going to be room for error, even in science. And you can see this through measurement, right? Because no matter how precise our measurement devices are, there's always going to be a margin of error. And the thing is that we can predict what this margin of error is, and therefore we can account for the level of inaccuracy that we might expect from some type of scientific pursuit. But on a fundamental level, even the most advanced, particle physics labs aren't going to have perfect 100% accuracy. And I think this is the thing that really gets to the root of the reality that we live in, is that nothing is 100% true and nothing is 100% false. Everything is this complex interaction between the observer and the observed. There's this dance of sorts between the two where some things are, apparent and some things aren't. And I think this is what essentially the pursuit of scientific discovery has all been about, right? Once you developed an advanced theory in science, it is essentially based on the premise that there is so much evidence to support this theory that it would take an extreme deviation from our currently observed reality to show that this theory is not true. Like, a great example is the theory of relativity. You know, Einstein's famous life work. Basically, in this theory, predicts a lot of the fundamental laws of physics that physicists and scientists use today to do everything from engineering computers and technology to observing stars that are hundreds of light years away to basically everything in our modern life, right? On some level, I think the point of being human is to get as close to reality as you can, because the closer you can operate to reality, the more successful you will be in life. Like, if someone says to you, oh, you can make $200,000 a year in this career, it is of utmost importance that, first of all, they are telling the truth, that it's a realistic, attainable goal. But then also, is it realistic to you personally? Like, can you, with your given limitations and potential abilities, reach a goal that other people are purporting as easy or at least attainable, right? And the problem is that we live in a world that is so fundamentally hierarchical that there's this fabrication of sort of truth that exists where because you can treat certain forms of lies and deception as reality, and they are stable enough because they are reinforced by the collective consciousness, huge segments of society are based on these concepts that are fundamentally lies. Like, for example, there is no way that a single person could generate $1 billion in value, right? Like, there's no way that a single person could do that much work or effort. All it is a pyramid scheme on some level of everything from the lower paid factory workers who manufacture the infrastructure and hardware required to the higher level knowledge workers who might program the code base for a technology company. And then it just keeps going up to like the higher level managers and then the CEO and founders, right? But these people, they might have an incredible gift for organizing people. Like, they might be incredibly good at raising venture capital money, for example. But these people do not fundamentally provide millions to billions of dollars in value alone. They just got lucky that their position, or they just got lucky that their position is sort of the keystone of an organization. And here's the fundamental paradox at the heart of many of the world's problems, I think. And that is the fact that if you tell a lie enough, eventually it actually becomes more true on some level, because it is being reinforced by so many people that they actually create the physical manifestation of the lie in reality, right? So we see this a lot in politics, where the more people believe propaganda about, let's say, a marginalized group of people or about, a certain ideology, the more they're likely to only see the parts of it that are bad and not see the parts of it that might be good, that they might even agree with if they were seeing it through an unbiased lens. So what I think is that also, when there's so much lies and propaganda permeating the entirety of society, it creates this reality in which people actually make the thing that they think is bad into a bigger problem than it originally was. Because the more you fight against something, the more desperate the people who might see something good in it are going to fight back against you, and then it's going to drive them into a more combative, aggressive state of mind. And it creates this relative reframing, right? Where because reality is fundamentally limited to our own perception of what it is, it creates this reality where the more we hate something, the more important it actually becomes to us. Like the true trick behind fixing your problems in life, I think, is on some level figuring out a way to delegitimize the importance of it to you on a personal level. Whether that means realizing that it's not as bad as it was as you thought, or if that means realizing that it is truly a bad thing, but that you just really just need to limit the channels through which you are exposed to it, right? And I think oftentimes people take this approach where it's like, oh no, I have to fight it like head on. Like I have to believe in this lie around my personal identity, because a lot of our emotions and motivations are rooted in primitive tribalist impulses, like this impulse to only trust or feel safe around people that have things in common with us. So that means people who look like us racially, that people that look like us physically. So that could mean gender even, right? That could mean language. And on some level, these things do align with the degree to which you might feel comfortable trusting someone. But the fundamental issue here is that it's not necessarily accurate, because if you could bridge the communication gap, which is really at the heart of what I'm getting to, is I think what people would realize is that most people just want good for themselves and their friends and family, right? They don't necessarily want war and destruction, but when they see an external threat as a fundamental threat to their prosperity, they will become the evil party in that interaction, even more evil than maybe their so-called enemy originally was being. And this is the fundamental principle of escalation. The more you attack or villainize an enemy, the stronger and the harder they will hit you back. And it's an incredibly difficult issue, and it permeates across all of society. It's intensely related to global conflicts and wars, right? Because everything fundamentally comes down to how much resentment are you going to hold, how much lack of empathy do you have, and how much self-conviction and ego do you have in your heart, right? And that is why we're seeing so many horrible things happening around the world to people. That is why there's so much violence and destruction and death everywhere, right? Like, if we could fundamentally solve this problem of lying to ourselves about everything, like we lie to ourselves about how much of a threat other people are going to be to us, and we lie to ourselves about, even what we want. Like, for example, I've changed my major in college like 2 or 3 times, depending on how you count it. And on some level, the reason I wasn't in the right field of study or the right major is because society lied to me about what was important. Because society only tells you what the average believes or thinks is valuable. Society will never take into account individual abilities and preferences. So that's why you need to really know yourself and not think of yourself as a part of this larger society. Because if you are not easily going to conform to the beliefs and values of your larger cultural context, you're going to struggle immensely in life to fit in to that framework. And for example, there is a huge oversaturation of people in the field of computer science and software engineering. And I think a large reason for this oversaturation is that every kid who even showed a small degree of aptitude for STEM basically was pushed into computer science and engineering fields because everyone knows engineers make a lot of money. Everyone knows that it's, a high growth industry. So they were pushed into this even if maybe their fundamental desire and passion wasn't in this field originally. And like I said earlier, the fundamental mass psychosis actually makes people believe that they truly want this thing, right? But I think more of us should examine from a base fundamental level, what is it that we truly want when we strip away all of the societal expectations, all of these fabrications that keep us in the state of collective delusion. Because if you are really good at following the delusion, if you can keep up with all the trends and just follow, the cutting edge of popularity perfectly, yeah, you'll be successful. But if you're anywhere below that cutting edge of sort of cultural novelty, you're going to fall behind and wonder why you're struggling so much in life. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that people need to learn how to follow their own path in life. And that doesn't mean rejecting all of society. It doesn't mean not, taking influence from other people.